My friends, where is Apollo Legend? And what happened to his Oceanside Speedrun Marathon? It's been about 6 months since Apollo has last uploaded a video to his YouTube channel, and about 4 months since he was last seen or heard from at all. People are still asking questions regularly about what happened to him. So today's the day I share what I know about everything that happened with Apollo Legend and the Oceanside Marathon. People are genuinely concerned and the information needs to get out there. Some might not know, but I was involved with much of the early process in creating Oceanside and was one of the last people in contact with Apollo Legend. So let's get started. And to start, we have to go pretty far back to about fall 2016, around the time when Apollo was first making YouTube videos on his channel. He had been involved with the speedrunning community before then, going by the pseudonym Frogbert, so a pretty good name change decision on his part. But in late 2016, he uploaded some of his first popular videos, about Bonesaw being banned from GDQ, the downfall of Narcissa Wright, the death of speedrunning, an overarching criticism of GDQ itself. He gave outspoken opinions that were pretty rare among speedrunners, a community inhabited by people who largely prefer to avoid any sort of friction and float merrily down the stream rather than rocking the boat. I didn't know it at the time, but Apollo sent me a Twitch PM around this same time, recognizing that I too was one of few speedrunners who would dare vocalize thoughts similar to those he'd shared in his videos. However, I was still on hiatus from the community, so I didn't get around to seeing this message until January 2017, when I'd returned to streaming. At this point, Apollo hadn't uploaded a video or really been seen for a couple of months, sort of a recurring theme with Mr. Legend. And knowing a little about him, knowing he enjoyed rustling some jimmies and wanting to get myself involved in some exciting action, I mentioned on stream that I'd like to get in touch with him again, having missed our previous connection. I guess one of my viewers had a direct line to Apollo, and the next day Apollo had sent me a Twitter DM, thus beginning the relationship between Apollo and I. A common topic of discussion in the speedrun world, especially around the time of GDQ events, is the creation, even if just in theory, of other speedrunning events. I'd often talk about it as filler on stream, as I'm sure many others did, but people started taking this small talk seriously, and Apollo was one of those people. I'd soon get a number of messages from various viewers and speedrunners telling me that if I wanted to create my own speedrunning event, I didn't really, to be clear. I'd have to talk to one very specific person, a master in the organization of gaming events, a man who goes by the name of Raging Cherry, the organizer of Smash the Record, a Smash Bros. Tournament and speedrunning marathon, among other events. I never reached out to Cherry, but Apollo did. And come March 2017, the three of us had a little Discord server where we'd chat and toss around ideas about a theoretical speedrunning event. Over the next few months, we'd do just that and schedule voice calls every 2 to 3 weeks or so. We'd discuss what kind of event we wanted this to be, who we wanted to be at the event, what we'd call it, and all the practicalities of running such an event. The main vision for the event that Apollo and I, and pretty much everyone else who felt that AGDQ got worse over the years, was to bring back the kind of coziness and familiarity that we had at, say, the GDQs in 2013, where you'd watch all week and become familiar with the cast of characters coming into and out of the stream room, really getting to know some of the runners, which made it easier to relate to and feel involved in the stream. So we had the vision of renting and streaming from some kind of streamer house, with a bunch of well-known and already familiar speedrunners who would come in and out of the stream, do their runs, hang out with other runners, do non-speedrunning content on stream, whether that be gaming related like Mario Party or Mario Kart tournaments, or non-gaming related like cooking in the kitchen, hanging out in the living room, or streaming IRL content outside. And we really wanted to have a lot of focus on the non-gaming content to make it a unique sort of speedrunning event. We threw around a few ideas to name the event. Some choices like the revival of speedrunning, or the big house, were unavailable as Cherry let us know that these were already the names of Smash Bros. Events. I was the one who came up with Oceanside, which Apollo didn't like at first, but what I was going for was an allusion to the outdoor activity which we hoped would become a focal point of the event. And after we felt around a few names with some of the invitees and others, the people seemed to like Oceanside, so it stuck. We came up with a list of speedrunners who we wanted to invite to the event, and Apollo began gauging them for interest. We started looking for venues, some potential Airbnbs we could rent. We wanted the house to have good enough internet so that anyone who came to the event could stream on their own personal channels without disrupting the main stream. Oftentimes, full-time streamers won't attend events because the opportunity cost of a few days of not streaming is just too large. So we wanted to eliminate that reason not to attend. We wanted to cover the cost of travel for all runners, something GDQ doesn't do, to increase the likelihood of invitees attending. And a common criticism of GDQ is that some perceive that the content of the event is directed by what the charity or the sponsors want. So Apollo wanted to avoid that by not involving any charities or sponsors in order to take full creative control of the content of the event. Obviously, not taking on sponsors and wanting to pay for travel and renting a house for a weekend left a gaping question. How would this all be financed? We came up with a budget which Apollo wanted to be fully transparent and settled on $20,000 to fly out 16 speedrunners, pay for a house for a weekend, pay for food, technical setup, and anything else that might come up. Raging Cherry was able to give the dose of reality here and share that really the only way to fund this event would be to raise the funds beforehand. Cherry had experience in doing this exact thing and told us about how he'd seen events get crowdfunded, whether it be something like a GoFundMe or selling some kind of merch, t-shirts, keychains, access to behind-the-scenes content, or whatever it may be. Obviously, this wasn't the number one choice plan, or at least it wasn't something that had been given much thought to prior, but Apollo seemed to take it in stride and realize that this would have to happen in order for the event to take place. Not too long after these discussions, though, in July 2017, Cherry told us that he could no longer be involved in the event and share any advice. He'd moved jobs from working with Tempo Storm to ESL and couldn't be involved in any third-party events. And that was that. Oceanside had lost a great advisor in what was probably the first one of 4 great blows to the event. But Apollo was still determined. Around this time, 2 more things were happening. SGDQ 2017 took place, which performed similarly to the recent GDQs, leaving some critics of the event wishing for the good old days, or some alternative event to turn towards. Apollo's YouTube channel had also been doing really well, with several of his top 10 style videos reaching over 3 million views, earning him a good deal of income. Apollo was pretty confident that with millions of people regularly viewing his content, he could convert these views into funds raised for Oceanside. Apollo knew that the iron was hot, and the time to strike was now. So he started looking into getting a logo designed and a video trailer made, getting enough together to announce and launch the event. I know he went to Fiverr to get the trailer made, and I think he went to Fiverr for the logo too, though that might have been designed by a fellow speedrunner. The logo turned out really great as far as I'm concerned, but the trailers that came back from Fiverr were pretty bad, so Apollo just ended up making it himself. If you've seen that original Oceanside launch trailer, that's the one Apollo made, using clips of speedrunners who had given at least a soft yes in terms of interest, and at the end of the trailer, in all his 4:3 aspect ratio glory, Apollo pitches that he needs to raise $20,000 to make the marathon happen. Of course, we all know how that played out. It went over like a lead balloon. Almost immediately, people began questioning Apollo's intentions in raising $20,000 to fund a speedrunning event. I remember specifically Trihex, who was featured in the trailer, and at this point was in a small Oceanside Runners Discord group that Apollo had made, wrote something to the effect of, damn Apollo, I didn't know you were going to ask to fundraise $20,000 right away. I could have told you this would be the reaction you'd get. I guess Trihex has been around for long enough and seen enough events to know. And so the months dragged on with little apparent progress on Oceanside. Behind the scenes, however, Apollo had been recruiting people to work on a web page for Oceanside, as well as the stream page and some back-end technical stuff. Orchestra, a well-known Breath of the Wild speedrunner, was one of the people working on this website and would become an invitee to the event. Apollo had also booked an Airbnb at some point around here for the dates of April 20 to 22, 2018. A house in Orlando, Florida, which, of course, if you know Floridian geography, isn't actually on the ocean. It did have a pool though, and many early critics of the event would often joke something like, Oceanside? Haha, it'll probably end up being something more like poolside. And as it turns out, that actually would have been the case. But Apollo definitely was working hard behind the scenes, but he was still pretty quiet publicly, and only a few $100 had been raised. Apollo had not been very active on YouTube either during this period, but that changed in December 2017 when he uploaded 10 speedrunners who were caught cheating, which has since become the most viewed video on his entire channel, and one of the most viewed speedrunning videos on all of YouTube. I remember watching that video on my mobile phone when it came out, and getting like, literally 6 ads on it, so Apollo had a sense of how big that video would get, and loaded it up with ad breaks. Little had changed into the new year, now nearing 3 months until the planned date of the event, with no public news or updates, and still under $1,000 raised. Apollo messaged me and asked to take a voice call, where we chatted sometime during or shortly after HDQ 2018. Apollo and I talked about a lot of things, but one of which was that he made a lot of money from that 10 speedrunners who were caught cheating video, which had about 3.5 million views at that point. Enough money to entirely fund Oceanside, which he was going to do out of his own pocket. He was going to make an update video sharing that the event was completely funded and would go ahead as planned, and he told me to book a plane ticket and send him the invoice so he could cover the cost. I told him I'd talk to a few other invitees who lived in my area to see if we want to fly out together and get back to him on that. We talked more about some non-speedrunning activities we'd do on stream, stuff like a Mario Kart tournament or hanging out in the kitchen cooking, and I suggested he should mention these in his upcoming update video, as it seemed he hadn't communicated these parts of the event very well to that point. I told him I'd do a speed lore episode live from the event, and he could mention that in the update video as well, all of which he ended up doing, though that update video has since been deleted from his channel. Apollo didn't mention, however, in that update video, that he was using his own money to fund the event, an omission that left many people wondering what exactly was going on with the GoFundMe page showing an $18,000 donation from Apollo himself. Apollo either thought nothing of it, or didn't care, or intentionally wanted to be vague about it, and it seems he had other things in mind. On January 23rd, 2018, he uploaded a video, The Biggest Cheater in Gaming History, which was an exquisite summary takedown of Todd Rogers and his 1,700 fake scores, the final straw that led to Todd Rogers' scores being removed from the Twin Galaxies record-keeping website. Many debated whether or not Apollo was responsible for the scores finally being removed. Some claimed Apollo just regurgitated already known information, while others pointed out that, while true, Twin Galaxies could have just kept ignoring this information like they'd been doing already, had it not been for Apollo's video reaching the trending page of YouTube and being widely shared and featured that week. I personally was impressed with Apollo's independent research in that video, especially him getting in touch with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office to ask about Todd's alleged proof tapes that were seized when investigating former Twin Galaxies referee and current federal inmate 191944 Ron Corsoran. But that's an entirely separate conversation unto itself. Suffice to say, Apollo was feeling pretty good about being the one who, in the eyes of many, finally put an end to Toddzilla's reign of fake scores all over Twin Galaxies, and he made a follow-up video on February the 4th. 2 weeks later, on February 17, Apollo uploaded another video with another legendary gaming figure in his sights. World's most infamous Donkey Kong player caught cheating. Another convincing takedown, this time of Billy Mitchell of the King of Kong and classic arcade fame. Many of you will have some idea of where this is heading now. That same month, I actually spent a good deal of time on a script for a video about Billy Mitchell myself, very similar to the one Apollo made, focusing on things like the MAME transitions and the ridiculous board swap footage, but I didn't end up making it. I didn't like how it turned out, and also in the back of my mind I thought, maybe it's not such a great idea to go after a guy like Billy Mitchell. You never know what he might try to pull. After all, he did sue the regular show and lost for what he allegedly took as an unflattering portrayal of his likeness. and I didn't want that to happen to me, so I scrapped the video. Apollo's video, however, was released to wide acclaim, it got millions of views, and further fanned the flames on the ongoing dispute about Billy Mitchell's scores. Apollo was doing great work with really interesting video content, exposing some of the great alleged frauds of the gaming world, but it seemed like this was distracting him from organizing Oceanside, now only 2 months away. And yet another wrench would get thrown into Oceanside's plan that same month. You see, an esports organization by the name of Beast Coast GG did what a few other esports organizations have tried or done in recent times, signing speedrunners to the roster as some sort of sponsored streamer. But obviously Beast Coast was pursuing similar speedrunners as Oceanside, guys who already had good followings and who were competitive in their games. Beast Coast signed several of these runners who Oceanside had invited or who had already given a soft yes to attend the event, guys like Cheezo5, Caleb Hart, Imagine Phil, and Beast Coast did not want the runners attending Oceanside. It almost seemed like their signing was contingent on not going to Oceanside. Perhaps Beast Coast didn't like Apollo's reputation, or maybe they were turned off by a seemingly poorly organized event and just didn't want to associate with it. And that's totally fine, that's the free market, that's a decision made by the esports team and those runners. But the fact of the matter was that Oceanside had indeed lost some of its prospective attendees and runners. People had started to hear that some of these high-profile runners would not be attending Oceanside, and at this point the event was probably hanging on by a thread. With Apollo still being quiet about the event, I'd often get asked if it were still happening. I knew Apollo had booked the Airbnb and told me he'd pay for my flight out there, so the answer I gave would usually be something like, at the very least, it'll be, me, Apollo, Easyscape, Ryan Lockwood, and a few other guys who are still interested, going to Orlando, hanging out in a mansion, streaming video games and other activities for a weekend, and that doesn't sound so bad. And I really think that all may have ended up happening if Apollo didn't get even more distracted. You see, if you follow Billy Mitchell at all before the Apollo Legend video, it was pretty common of him to share on Facebook or wherever that he'd be attending an arcade or convention to hang out and play games, and he'd openly invite the public to come meet him. One of these events was scheduled for February 24 at an arcade in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And so on February 22nd, Apollo bought a plane ticket to fly out in an effort to meet Billy Mitchell and ask him about his emulator usage and world record claims in person, hopefully recording the whole process for a follow-up video. Apollo had chatted a little about it in a Discord channel we're both in, along with some other speedrunning YouTube content creators. He posted pictures of the Billy Mitchell costume he was going to wear, not to conceal his identity, but to pretend he was some kind of Billy Mitchell superfan. He mentioned that he had recorded some short footage describing his plan for what he'd do when he arrives and confronts Billy, though he never shared any of that. We also talked a bit about the legality of video or audio recordings and how it differs in one-party or two-party states. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me that Apollo shouldn't have any problem openly recording video in a publicly invited event and public space. Apollo gave us updates on the night of February 24th. He had his friend Lord Narwhal inside the arcade while he waited outside in a vehicle, in costume, waiting for Billy to finish playing at an arcade machine and begin walking around greeting the attendees. Once Narwhal gave Apollo the go-ahead, Apollo went in and asked for a picture with Billy.
Oh, you remember better. Good for you.
Cool.
Robin, your tip? Can I give this one to you tip? You get it?
Oh yeah.
You don't know that? I got your guys on too.
What happened?
Well, I wanted to ask you guys, what were you guys doing with that fake board swap video?
Oh,
Yeah, what are you doing with that?
oh, the fake board swap video.
No, I just wanted to know what was going on.
Come on, you gotta explain yourself
Yeah.
here.
Okay, I gotta explain myself. All right, you want to know what the fake board swap video was?
Yeah.
It was a YouTube moment.
Now, this clip of that moment wouldn't be made public until Apollo uploaded it himself and shared it to our Discord group on April 10th. And I don't want to get out of chronological order here, but it is important to know that this is what happened the night of February 24. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but it doesn't seem so bad, does it? In the following days, Apollo tweeted a few thoughts on what Billy and Twin Galaxies might be up to, with his last tweet being made on February 26th. And after that, we didn't hear from Apollo again for several weeks. No one did. And this was surprising to me because it really seemed like he was keen to make a video using footage and stories from his trip to Florida. On March 15, still not having heard from Apollo, Twin Galaxies posted, then later revised this article. Rumor: YouTuber Apollo legend may face legal battle over Billy Mitchell. So it was at this point where we knew Apollo, and hence Oceanside, might really be in trouble. There was nothing to do but speculate. Did Apollo break some law? Did something go down in the arcade we don't know about? Or is this another allegedly frivolous lawsuit by Billy? Had Apollo been ordered to keep quiet for his legal well-being? March came and went, and so going into April, we were now 3 weeks away from the scheduled start of Oceanside, and Apollo still hadn't been publicly heard from since the tweets on February 26th. The handful of runners who were still holding out hope that Oceanside would take place had pretty much come to grips with the reality that it wasn't happening. Apollo tried hard and did a lot of work behind the scenes to make it happen, more than many people would have ever imagined, but it didn't happen. I point to the 4 blows or nails in the coffin that led to Oceanside not happening in some way, shape, or form. Losing our mentor and advisor early in the process obviously didn't help, nor did losing runners to Beast Coast, though those 2 items could have been overcome. Apollo's own inexperience, we'll say, in organizing these kind of events was a huge factor in Oceanside not taking place, and I do wonder what would have happened if I or anyone else he'd been working with on the event had stepped up and took on more responsibility in managing things. But I genuinely do believe that some sort of Oceanside event would have happened had it not been for the alleged, rumored, possible legal action of Billy Mitchell versus Apollo legend. Yeah, it might have just ended up being a half dozen guys hanging out, streaming some speedruns and other content. But most events, even GDQs, started small like that. Just some dudes playing video games in a basement. So who knows where Oceanside could have gone. Apollo was very self-aware of his own reputation in the speedrunning community, and really wanted to prove his naysayers wrong by putting on a successful speedrunning event, but because of his own shortcomings and a possible legal battle with Billy, that never happened. April 10 to 17 was an interesting week, and encompasses the absolute last I've heard from Apollo. On April 10, Apollo uploaded the clips of him at the arcade interacting with Billy. On April 12, Twin Galaxies announced that they would be removing Billy Mitchell's scores, which seemed to vindicate Apollo, not that it'd necessarily prevent any sort of possible lawsuit. That same date, one of Billy's pals, Richie Knuckles, uploaded a now-removed video pre-announcing that Billy would be making an announcement about his scores being removed that weekend in Milwaukee at the Midwest Gaming Classic. Now, here's the part no one's really heard before. On April 13, Apollo flew to that event too. Apollo gave us details about his trip to Milwaukee, talking to officials and gamers about Billy's scores, sharing pictures with us. I told him that he should at least make some kind of statement about Oceanside that week. He said he'd draft up something from the hotel room. On April 15, Billy Mitchell released a statement response video through Old School Gamer magazine, which was received predictably, but somehow made it onto YouTube's trending page. On April 17, Apollo sent a few messages in our Discord, seeming intent on using footage and knowledge gained from his trip in a new video. And that was literally the last I've heard from him. Both Easyscape and Lord Narwhal, 2 of Apollo's other closest associates, have not heard from him since, either. Apollo never did make a public statement about Oceanside, but on April 20, the supposed date of the start of the event, he sent an email to those who donated to the GoFundMe page, citing his own financial difficulties as the reason to cancel the event, and offering any donors a full refund. I was surprised that he didn't mention Billy, or at least a possible legal situation, as a reason to cancel the event, rather focusing on his finances. After all, his top 10 speedrunners who were caught cheating video only continues to get more views, as well as his other videos about Todd Rogers and Billy Mitchell, so it seemed to me at least like he's doing just fine in that regard. The email was later shared to our speedrun, where the top comment read, in response to Apollo's financial difficulties, 100% wrecked by crypto. When I saw that comment, I immediately responded, I can confirm this isn't what happened. But I deleted that post because, to tell you the truth, I don't know. I thought I knew most of the story, but there are a lot of things we don't know about Apollo. This is a guy who regularly goes off the E-grid for months at a time, who explores remote caves in the Pacific Northwest for fun. There's a lot more to Apollo than even his closest online friends would know, so it is completely possible that he dumped all of his YouTube money into Zem or Arct or BitConnect or any other coin, which tanked when cryptocurrency crashed in January 2018. But again, that's just speculation, and we could speculate any endless number of things that have happened to him over the last few months. And all we know is that email he put out to his GoFundMe donors on April 20 is the last me or anyone I know have heard from him still today, nearly 4 months later. Is it possible he's still tied up in some lawsuit with Billy Mitchell and has been advised to keep quiet? Is he just too embarrassed to show his face after the failure of Oceanside? Does he have no good plan to re-enter the scene? We just don't know. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if we never hear from him again. It's a shame too, his YouTube channel was really starting to take off, the content he was starting to pursue had more quality and gravitas, and who knows where he'd be now if Oceanside went off as planned and he continued making YouTube videos. One final thing to touch on that relates to Oceanside is the creation of many new speedrunning events or competitions over the last year. But there's one in particular, Speedrun Chaos, put on by the esports organization Tempo Storm, which features a roster of 16 well-known and accomplished speedrunners, very similar sounding to what Oceanside had in mind. Raging Cherry seems to be involved with that event, and I'm not saying they stole the idea from Oceanside or anything. It's not like the idea of having a small handful of highly billed speedrunners at an event is a unique one. But Speedrun Chaos certainly seems to have been created in the void of Oceanside. And even with Raging Cherry involved, the event has already been delayed due to an unexpected change from the key sponsor of the event. So it again goes to show just how challenging it is, even for the most seasoned of professionals, to pull off an event like this. That being said, I do look forward to seeing how it plays out, if it does end up happening, because it could lead the way for similar events to be created, and the more good speedrunning events there are, the better it is for everyone. So there's the story of what happened to Apollo Legend and why his Oceanside event failed, at least as much as I know. I hope I've been able to answer at least some of the questions surrounding it all and offer some new insight or information into what happened, but the ultimate truth is we just don't know where he's been all this time or what has been going on. As far as I know, there is no ongoing lawsuit with Billy currently, but that doesn't mean that tomorrow or at any point in the future one might not start, or that Apollo's lawyers have advised him to keep quiet to let this all blow over, just in case. I do occasionally Google his real name plus obituary, and I haven't found anything yet, so I think it's at least safe to say that he's still alive, but beyond that, we just don't know. Anyways, this video is more than long enough to call it here, so thanks for hearing it out if you made it this far, and if there's anything you still want to know, just ask in the comments and I'll try to get to it with what I know. In the meantime, stay true, my friends, and I'll see you in the next stream or video.